The bell rang, signaling the end of another school day. Fourth grader Tommy Jacobs grabbed his backpack, his sneakers squeaking on the polished hallway floor as he joined the crowd of children rushing toward the school doors. The late afternoon sun poured through the tall windows, casting long shadows over the rows of lockers. It was supposed to be an ordinary day, but by the time the next morning came, Tommy's life would be changed forever. Tommy's mother was running late, as usual. It didn't bother him much. He liked hanging out near the school steps, watching the older kids skateboard in the parking lot. He sat on the concrete stairs, swinging his legs and fiddling with the zipper of his backpack. Most of his classmates were already gone, their laughter and chatter fading into the distance. "Hey, kid," a voice called out, cutting through the dull hum of a nearby leaf blower. Tommy turned his head. A man stood a few feet away, tall and lean, with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He had a friendly smile, the kind adults put on when trying to talk to kids without scaring them. "You're Tommy, right?" the man asked. Tommy hesitated, clutching the straps of his backpack. His mom had always told him not to talk to strangers, but the man seemed to know him, or at least his name. Yeah, Tommy answered cautiously. The man's smile widened. "I'm your friend Billy's uncle. You know Billy, right? From Mrs. Carter's class." Tommy's guard lowered slightly. Billy was his best friend. They sat together every day during lunch, trading snacks and laughing at jokes no one else seemed to find funny. "Yeah, I know Billy," Tommy said, standing up. "Where is he?" "That's what I'm here for," the man said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "Billy's mom asked me to pick you up. There's a play date at their house, and they thought it'd be easier if I grabbed you on the way. She's running late, too." Tommy's stomach did a little flip, the kind it did when something felt off, but the man didn't look like a bad guy. He had kind eyes, didn't he? And he knew about Billy and Mrs. Carter. That had to count for something. "I don't know," Tommy said slowly. The man crouched down to Tommy's eye level, his smile unwavering. "I get it. You've got to be careful. But trust me, kiddo, Billy's waiting for you. You don't want to miss out, do you?" Tommy bit his lip, glancing around the empty schoolyard. His mom wasn't here yet. The man extended his hand, his fingers long and calloused. "Come on," he said. "Let's not keep Billy waiting." The ride in the old beat-up sedan was quiet, except for the low hum of the engine. The man didn't talk much, which suited Tommy just fine. He stared out the window, watching familiar landmarks pass by and then disappear, replaced by unfamiliar streets. The houses were spaced farther apart here, the yards overgrown and shadowed by tall trees. Tommy's unease grew. "This doesn't look like Billy's neighborhood," he said. The man glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable under the brim of his cap. "We're taking a shortcut," he said, his voice clipped. "Almost there." Tommy's fingers tightened around the edge of his seat. The shortcut turned into a long drive down a gravel road, the trees closing in on both sides. The car came to a stop in front of an old two-story house with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. "This doesn't look like Billy's house," Tommy said, his voice trembling. The man didn't answer. He got out of the car, walked around to Tommy's side, and opened the door. His smile was gone now, replaced by a hard, cold look. "Get out," he said. Tommy's heart raced. "I want to go home." The man grabbed Tommy's arm, his grip like a vice. "I said, get out." The basement was dark and smelled of damp concrete. Tommy's footsteps echoed as the man shoved him down the creaking wooden stairs. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound reverberating like a gunshot. Tommy stood frozen in the pitch-black room, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The only light came from a narrow, grimy window high on the wall. He could make out the faint outlines of a few boxes, a rickety table, and an old chair. Fear threatened to consume him, but Tommy forced himself to think. "Mom always says I'm smart," he reminded himself. "I have to be smart now." He fumbled for his backpack, which the man had tossed into the corner. His fingers brushed against something hard and metallic, his cheap toy walkie-talkie. It was a birthday gift from Billy. Tommy's heart sank. It wouldn't work. It was just a toy. But then he remembered the emergency phone number his mom had drilled into his head. He unzipped the front pocket of his backpack, his hands shaking, and pulled out his school-issued tablet. It had a crack in the screen from when he dropped it during recess, but it still worked. He opened the emergency call app, his fingers trembling as he typed in the number. The line rang once, twice, and then, "911, what's your emergency?" a calm voice said. Tommy's words spilled out in a rush, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Tommy Jacobs, and a man took me. I don't know where I am, but it's a basement, and it smells bad, and I'm scared." "Stay on the line, Tommy," the dispatcher said, her voice steady and soothing. "We're going to find you. Can you see anything that might help us?" Tommy looked around, squinting in the dim light. "There's a window," he said. "It's small, but I think I can reach it." "Good. Look out the window and tell me what you see." He dragged a box over to the wall and climbed onto it, peering out. The glass was dirty, but he could make out the faint outline of a rusted mailbox with the numbers 213 on it. 213, he repeated to the dispatcher. "That's all I can see." "You're doing great, Tommy," she said. "Stay where you are. Officers are on their way." The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Tommy's heart leapt at the sound of sirens in the distance. He pressed his ear against the door, straining to hear. The man's voice came from upstairs, raised in anger, and then a crash, the sound of heavy boots, shouting. The basement door flew open, and a police officer appeared, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Tommy," he called. Tommy ran to him, tears streaming down his face. The officer scooped him up, holding him close. "You're safe now," he said. Later, Tommy sat in the back of a police car, wrapped in a warm blanket. His mom arrived, her face pale and streaked with tears. She hugged him so tightly he could barely breathe, but he didn't care. He was safe. The man was arrested, his twisted plans foiled by Tommy's quick thinking. The officers called Tommy a hero, but Tommy didn't feel like a hero. He just felt lucky to be alive. And as the sun set on what could have been his last day on Earth, he promised himself he'd never let his guard down again. The last day of school was supposed to be the start of freedom. No more teachers, no more homework, just long summer days stretched out before them like an endless ribbon of sunshine. But for Sam, Ellie, Max, and Jenny, this final day marked the beginning of something far darker. The rumor had started circulating months earlier, whispered among students in hushed tones and giggles during recess. The old elementary school, Woodridge Primary, was haunted. Abandoned years ago due to structural issues, the building stood at the edge of town like a broken tombstone, its windows shattered and its playground overrun with weeds. Some said the ghost of a janitor still wandered the halls, searching for the children he'd never saved during a tragic fire decades earlier. Others claimed it was something older, something far worse. Sam didn't believe in ghosts. He was the ringleader, always ready to prove a point, and that's why they were here now, standing in the shadow of the crumbling school as twilight bled into night. "All right," Sam said, holding up a flashlight and grinning. "Who's ready to meet the Woodridge ghost?" Max shifted uncomfortably, his lanky frame silhouetted against the darkening sky. "This is stupid. We could get in real trouble if someone catches us." "No one's going to catch us," Sam said, waving off the concern. "The place has been empty for years. Besides, it's our last night as middle schoolers. Don't you want to do something memorable?" Ellie, ever the voice of reason, folded her arms and frowned. "Breaking and entering isn't exactly what I had in mind." Jenny, the quietest of the group, tugged her hoodie tighter around her. What if the stories are true?" "They're not," Sam said firmly, aiming his flashlight at the rusted chain-link fence surrounding the property. "Come on, let's go." Getting inside was easier than they'd expected. The fence had a gaping hole near the back, and the school's side door hung loosely on its hinges, creaking open with a push. The air inside was stale, heavy with the smell of mildew and old wood. Their footsteps echoed against the tiled floor as they moved through the empty halls, the beam of Sam's flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. Lockers stood ajar, their doors dented and rusted. A faded banner near the ceiling read, "Have a great summer," in cheerful, peeling letters. "This is kind of creepy," Ellie admitted, her voice hushed. "That's the point," Sam said, his grin widening. "All right, let's split up. We'll cover more ground that way." Jenny's eyes widened. Are you serious? Haven't you ever seen a horror movie? Sam rolled his eyes. Fine, stick together if you're scared, but I'm checking out the gym. Without waiting for a response, he strode down the hall, his flashlight bouncing with each step. The others exchanged nervous glances before following him. The gym was just as decrepit as the rest of the school. Bleachers lined the walls, their wooden planks warped and splintered. A basketball hoop hung crookedly, its net reduced to frayed strings. Nothing spooky here, Sam said, shining his flashlight around. As if in response, a loud bang echoed through the building. What was that? Jenny whispered, clutching Ellie's arm. Max tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. Probably just the wind. Or rats, Ellie added. Or the ghost, Sam said, wiggling his fingers theatrically. Don't joke about that, Jenny hissed. The noise came again, louder this time, followed by a faint scraping sound. It seemed to be coming from the far end of the gym, near the doors leading to the basement. Sam's grin faltered for the first time. Okay, maybe that was a little weird. Ellie stepped back. We should leave. This was a bad idea. Before anyone could respond, the scraping sound grew louder, more deliberate, as if something or someone was dragging heavy chains across the floor. The doors to the basement creaked open, revealing nothing but blackness. Jenny let out a strangled gasp. Guys, I think we should... The words died in her throat as a figure stepped into the dim light. It was tall, unnaturally so, with limbs that seemed too long for its skeletal frame. Its head tilted at an odd angle, as if it had been broken and never reset. Its face, or what they thought was a face, was obscured by a burlap sack, stitched crudely together like a scarecrow's mask. For a moment, no one moved. The thing stood perfectly still, its head twitching slightly as if sniffing the air. Then it took a step forward. Jenny screamed, and the spell broke. Run! Sam shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the door. They bolted through the gym, their shoes skidding on the dusty floor. The creature followed, its footsteps impossibly fast and heavy, echoing like gunshots. Max was the first to stumble, crashing to the ground with a cry. Ellie stopped to help him up, but the thing was gaining on them. Its shadow stretched long across the walls, jagged and distorted. This way, Sam yelled, leading them down a side hallway. The corridor was narrow, lined with classrooms whose doors hung ajar. The group ducked into one, slamming the door shut and barricading it with an overturned desk. They huddled together, their breathing ragged. Outside, the heavy footsteps slowed, then stopped. Do you think it's gone? Max whispered. A sudden pounding on the door answered his question. The desk screeched as the creature shoved against the door, its inhuman strength making the wood splinter. Sam looked around wildly, his flashlight beam darting over broken desks and shelves. His eyes landed on a window, its glass cracked but intact. We can get out through there, he said, rushing toward it. Ellie hesitated. It's too high up. Jenny won't make it. I'll boost her, Max said. The pounding grew more violent, and the door began to give way. One by one, they climbed through the window, landing in the overgrown grass outside. Jenny was the last to go, her foot slipping as Max hoisted her up. She let out a small cry, but Sam grabbed her arm and pulled her through just as the door burst open. The creature stood in the doorway, its head cocked at that unnatural angle. For a moment, it simply stared at them, its sack-covered face unreadable. Then it stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. They didn't stop running until they were halfway back to town, their lungs burning and legs trembling. What was that? Jenny stammered, her voice breaking. Not a ghost, Max said, his face pale. Ghosts don't break down doors. Ellie shook her head. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't human. Sam didn't say anything. For the first time in his life, he was at a loss for words. The group parted ways at the edge of town, each retreating to their homes without another word. None of them slept that night, and when they met up the next day, they made an unspoken pact never to speak of what had happened. But deep down, they all knew the truth. Woodridge wasn't haunted by school spirit. It was something worse, something that, even now, might still be waiting in the dark halls, listening for the sound of footsteps to chase.